I want to share something with you that took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out. But once it did, it literally changed everything about how I think about selling expertise. So if you're a coach, if you're a consultant, you sell some sort of service or program, then you probably had this experience. You look at what you deliver, the actual thing, the transformation, the skill, the methodology, and you think, wow, this is really fucking good. Like genuinely, not in some sort of delusional way. Your clients actually get results. The people who work with you tell you time and time again that it changed their life, it changed their business, it changed their health, whatever your thing is. And yet, selling it sometimes feels like pulling teeth. Sure, you have people who buy your stuff and they're the perfect fit for it, they make a quick decision. But often there's all these other people who also fit your ICP, they're also perfect prospects for you. But you put the offer out, you write your sales pages, you write your VSLs, your webinars, your emails, all that stuff. And you find that people hesitate. They say that it sounds great, and they totally get what you do and they need it, it's important to them, but somehow they disappear. Or they ask you a bunch of questions and then go quiet. You get on calls and you spend 40 minutes explaining what should actually take 5. And you probably follow up, you chase after them. And there's this nagging sense that you're constantly trying to convince people of something that should be blindingly obvious. And maybe even you've had this thought, is my thing actually not as good as I think it is? A lot of people I talk to have this kind of offer insecurity creep in sometimes. And, these are people who are really good at what they do. They have the track record of getting people results. Their stuff is still selling, but it's not selling at the level that they know deep down inside that it should be selling. It takes a little more effort, it takes a little more work, it takes a little more marketing and selling for people to actually get the value, to actually buy their stuff. And if that's you, right? If you're listening to this, you're watching this, and you're nodding your head, then I want you to know that your expertise itself is not the problem. And I've worked with probably close to 1,000 people now specifically on their offers, and I've seen this pattern over and over again. The thing that they deliver, the actual product, the actual service, the transformation, it's usually quite excellent. That's not where the breakdown is. The breakdown is somewhere where they don't actually think to look, which is in their packaging. So let me explain what I mean, because when I say packaging, I don't mean the sales page design, I don't mean the logo, I don't mean the branding colors. I mean something far more fundamental, far deeper. So think about how most people buy wine. Maybe you've had this experience when you're, at the wine store. So most people who drink wine, they don't actually know much about wine. They can't really tell you the difference between a $15 bottle and a $500 bottle in a blind taste test. Actually, most sommeliers can't either, by the way. There's actual studies on this. So how do people choose? How do people decide between 2 bottles of wine, or, when they're staring at the wine rack at the store where there's 100 bottles, how do they decide? They look at the label, right? They look at the bottle, they look at the shape of the bottle, they look at the name, they look at the design, they look at the color palette. There's a couple of sentences on the back that describe the wine. Maybe talks about the region, maybe it talks about the notes of oak and tobacco and the legs and blah, 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 right? Maybe the price point. So they make a decision about what's inside the bottle based entirely on what's outside. Because when you think about it, they literally have no other way to evaluate what they're buying before they buy it. And that's true for a lot of things at the grocery store, right? Every product that is bought based on the packaging. It's not really bought based on the product inside. And in terms of wine, the thing is that the best winemakers in the world know this, right? They actually know this, which is why they obsess over the label, the shape of the bottle, the positioning on the shelf, the story on the back. not because the wine inside isn't good, but because the wine can't speak for itself through the glass. The packaging has to do that job. And your offer works the exact same way. So you may have the most incredible, like $500 or $5,000 bottle of wine behind that label, where there's real depth, insane skills, real transformation, results that blow people away once they experience it. But your prospect, especially at the point of sale or in the awareness or consideration stage, they can't actually taste the wine before they buy, right? They can't experience your product before they actually experience the product. Sure, and that's a separate video, that the whole marketing strategy idea is kind of retarded, because all marketing is manipulation. And what I find is that the best marketing, the most efficient marketing, the most fun marketing is actually demonstration. So we sell the thing by giving people an experience of the thing. So, a wine tasting of sorts. But again, that's a separate video. What I want to talk to you about today is this idea that when someone is buying your stuff, all they have to go on is the packaging, right? The way you describe the thing, the way you present it, the words you use, the way it lands in their brain in the first 30 seconds, how it makes them feel pretty much immediately at an emotional and somatic level. And what I find is that most experts, they're doing this thing where they have world-class wine, right? Their product is world-class, but they're putting it in a bottle which has a very confusing label. And that label makes people overwhelmed. It increases decision fatigue. It feels confusing. And as a result, people reach for a simpler, clearer option that's right next to it. And that's the thing that you might be missing. Because if you're like most experts, the chances are that you spend 95% of your energy on your product, right? The methodology, the curriculum, the deliverables, the transformation, what they actually get, your ability to actually effect that change in them. And probably only 5% on the actual packaging. That is the way it's presented, the way it's communicated, the way it lands in someone's brain when they first encounter it, which makes sense. You got into this because you care about the actual work, right? You became an expert in your domain because you're obsessed with that domain and you're obsessed with getting people results. And so, of course, you optimize for the product because that's where your heart is. But your prospect doesn't experience your product before they buy. Even though it's very optimal to give people an experience of the thing before they actually buy it, just like, when I bought a Tesla, what sold me was the test drive. Generally, what people experience is the packaging, right? The experience of the product comes after the transaction. The packaging is actually what determines whether the transaction happens at all. So what is packaging? You can think of it as the wrapper on a delicious piece of candy. Now, if it's not the sales page design or the branding, then what the fuck is this thing? So packaging is the answer to every question that the buyer's brain is asking before they even know that they're asking it. That's really important to understand, because this process happens really fast and it's deeply psychological and emotional. It happens in seconds and most of it is unconscious. So when someone encounters your offer, and this could be in any format, it could be on a Google Doc, it could be on a sales page, it could be in a DM, it could be in a VSL, whatever the thing is, whatever the place is, their brain runs through a series of things simultaneously. This is not really a logical checklist. It's more a feeling, right? It's a vibe check. It's an instant assessment of, is this for me? Right? Their brain is first scanning for relevancy. Do I get what this is? Can I picture what I would get? Can they generate a mental image that matches the outcome of the thing that you're promising? Does this feel different from other things that I've seen? Because their brain's always scanning for what's new and different. Do I trust this person? Is the risk even worth it? Is this even a good use of my time and energy? Forget money. When your packaging answers all those things in a really clear way, then buying your stuff feels effortless. It actually feels safe to the nervous system because they understand what they would get, not just on the other side, but in the process of working with you. So the person reads it and something immediately clicks. And, sometimes it's a no, and that's okay too. I think most people struggle more with the maybes and the signal of interest and then getting ghosted than they do with a clear-cut no. And this idea of getting people to a fast yes is really interesting, because I think this is the highest leverage thing you can do in your business, because you can try to generate more leads, you can try to create more content, you can, find more ways to book sales calls, you can get better. But when you have an offer that is not optimized to sell, or not optimized as much as it could be, then you're just increasing the volume on friction. You're increasing the volume on inefficiency. And that's why, when I work with people, one of the first things we do is actually make the offer convert better, because that makes every single other thing that they do in their business way more valuable. It increases the ROI on everything. So you want to have an offer that, for the right person, just is an obvious yes. Generally, what you want to be hearing is, hey, where do I sign up? How do we get started? What's the next step? I'm in. And when even one of the things that I've mentioned in terms of packaging is muddy, when it's not clear, when their brain cannot resolve even one of those questions, what happens is that the whole sales process stalls. And the person doesn't say that, hey, your packaging is unclear. What they say is, hey, I need to think about it. Or they say, sounds great, and then they disappear. Or they say, it's a little expensive, it's over my budget right now. Or I have to talk to my spouse. All those objections that I'm sure you've heard. And the thing to do here is not to get better at handling objections. It's doing the things, the one or two tweaks to your offer that makes the objections disappear, right? Because none of those objections are the real reason. Your prospects won't often tell you what the real reason is, because often they don't know. They just pick up on something that's unclear, that's dissonant, that feels incongruent, and it costs you the sale. The real reason is that generally the packaging left a gap that their brain couldn't fill, right? I'll say that again. Your packaging, the way you package your stuff, it left a gap that their brain couldn't fill. And that creates uncertainty. And when they feel uncertainty, when they feel a lack of clarity, then it doesn't feel safe to enter into a transaction with you. So what makes this really tricky is that your expertise, as in the more skilled you are at your stuff, the greater your expertise, the worse you will be at packaging your stuff. And the reason is you know too much, right? You see too much nuance. You want to communicate the full depth of what you offer. So what your brain is trying to do is it's going to keep adding more stuff to it. It's going to add, makes it more complex for you to deliver and more complex for them to actually leverage and get the results from your stuff, right? More layers of methodology, more nuance about who it's for and what makes it different. And you do this because you think when you add these things, it's going to make your prospect perceive your stuff as more valuable. It's going to make it safer for them to say yes, because, wow, you're making it so clear how much stuff there is in here, how much of an expert you are, right? And the depth of your skill. But even though those things are true and, all these things are accurate and you're adding a lot of value, when you do this, you also add a lot of weight to the decision-making process. And the kind of weight that I'm talking about is cognitive weight. So you have to understand that people are, especially now, super overwhelmed. And every decision that your prospect has to make takes energy, right? And so most people, they don't have, the more stuff you add, the more stuff you put on your prospect to process. So you're basically giving the buyer's brain a lot of stuff to compute, a lot of stuff to process. And when your prospect experiences this cognitive load, when they experience a lot of things that they need to figure out, compute, process, then what happens is that often it's going to make them defer the decision and not buy, because it's just too much. You probably do this in your life right now. There are things that you've been meaning to do. I know I have. And it's just too much to think about right now. So we put it off, right? We put it off into the future because we don't feel like we have the capacity to just get into all that stuff. So that's why we all have a whole bunch of life admin that we need to do, that we keep deferring. My wife and I, we have this joke. We have things in the at some point category. And the joke we make when, there's something that needs to happen that we just don't have capacity for is it goes in the at some point bucket. You don't want your prospects, especially your most ideal prospects, to put your stuff in the at some point category, right? So imagine you're shopping for a TV and one listing says, hey, this is a 65-inch 4K smart TV. Gorgeous picture. It works with all your streaming apps. It's $797. Done. You can picture it in your living room, right? You can see how much fun you would have when you're sitting on the couch and watching a movie. And then you compare it against the other option. In the other listing, it says 65-inch quantum dot neo QLED 4K 120 hertz HDR 10 plus smart TV with Dolby Atmos, AI powered 4K image upscaling, object tracking, sound plus, ambient mode, blah, 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 blah. Same TV, right? Pretty much does the same thing. Imperceptible difference in the picture quality. But the second listing makes your brain go, whoa, that's a lot to process. I need to really think about this. Not because it's necessarily worse, but because the packaging makes you work harder to consider the purchase. And chances are that your offer is doing that right now. Because most people, they pack their offer with too much stuff, and more offers die of indigestion than they do of starvation. As in, to break that down in a simple way, often I find that the reason people's offers aren't converting as well as they should and could be is because there's too much value in it. It's rarely that there's too little, right? So the more of an expert you are, the more likely it is that your offer is going to sound like the second TV listing, because you know all the features, you know all the nuances, and chances are you want the buyer to appreciate it the same way you do, but they can't. And honestly, you don't want them to, not before they buy, right? Because they don't have the same context that you have. They don't have the years of experience that makes all those details meaningful. All they have is a very overloaded brain that's trying to figure out really quickly, is this for me? Can I picture the result? Can I trust this person? And you're giving them a wall of specs when all they need are simple words and sentences that map directly to their experience and their situation. Now, I'm not saying you dumb down your work, right? Not even close. The depth of what you deliver is your greatest asset. And your methodology, your nuance, your ability to see what all the other people in your industry miss, that's why your clients love you. That's why they get results. That's why they refer people to you. What I'm saying is that the depth actually belongs in the delivery, not necessarily in the packaging. The packaging, the offer, the messaging, the positioning, the way you describe what you do, that needs to be ruthlessly simple. It needs to be clear enough that someone who's never heard of you can read it in 30 seconds and go, oh, I get it. That's exactly what I need. And then once someone starts working with you, the depth unfolds, right? Because we've earned the right to go deep with those people. Once they've said yes, once they've experienced the first session, the first module, the first conversation, whatever the thing is, that's where the nuance actually becomes a strength, and that actually creates a very healthy business because you're able to keep your clients for much longer. You have much better retention and LTV and all those things. And that happens because once they step in and they realize like, oh, wow, this goes way deeper than what I expected. And they realize that they got way more than what they paid for, what they expected. That's actually what creates loyalty because they're delighted, right? They're surprised by depth and the nuance and, all the stuff that you kind of hid from them. So that's the thing that creates referrals, that creates retention, it creates long-term clients, it creates raving fans. But all those things are applicable only when you allow the right people to get in the door, right? And actually work with you. All those things only become relevant if the packaging makes it easy for your people to say yes. Most of the market is relatively unaware. They're aware of the pain that they're experiencing. Some are aware of the problem. Only a few people are aware of the actual solution and then, a particular solution. And there's something really beautiful about this when you really let it land, because what I'm actually saying is that the problem isn't you. It's not your expertise. You don't need to go get a bunch more trainings and certifications to actually sell your stuff. It's not your methodology. It's not that the market doesn't want what you have. The problem is that the package that your genius comes wrapped in is making it really hard for people to see what's inside. And the reason why it's hard is because you actually care too much, right? You want them to appreciate the full depth of who you are and what you do. So you show it all up front. And the depth that should be your superpower actually becomes the thing that pushes your most perfect prospects away. So the fix here is not to become less deep. It's actually to put a simpler, clearer wrapper on something that's actually quite profound. To earn the right to show the depth by making the entry point so clear, so easy, and so obviously valuable that saying yes doesn't require a lot of heavy lifting on their part. And then this is the part that most people don't expect. You can actually charge way more for the same thing, right? The reason is clarity creates certainty. And certainty creates the willingness to invest, and the simplicity in your packaging, it signals confidence. So the expert who can describe their thing in one sentence actually seems more credible, not less. Because you can tell that this person's actually done the work to understand what actually matters in their work. So if any of this is hitting home, if you're looking at your offer right now and going like, shit, my packaging needs a little bit of work, then that's where the friction is. It's probably not your marketing, it's probably not your ads, it's probably not your pricing, it's probably not your sales skills, it's the packaging. And I go a lot deeper on all of this in a training that I put together called the Conversion Code, because it breaks down the specific psychological forces that determine whether your packaging creates pull and an instant yes, or friction and hesitation and maybes and people ghosting. It's $7. The link's in the description if you're curious. And if you know your stuff is good and you want it to convert better for the same amount of effort or less, then highly recommend checking that out. It could be the most valuable thing you could do for your business this week, because your product is probably great and all you need to do is make the packaging match.